go, live. Hi everyone, really happy to be introducing the first half of the Bloody Scotland debut shortlist. So I'm going to get them to introduce themselves now and tell us a little bit about their books. Starting with Richard, do you want to start us off?
Hi, I'm Richard Strachan. My novel is called The Unrecovered. It's a sort of historical Gothic mystery. It's set towards the end of the First World War. It follows three characters. There's a volunteer nurse called Esther, who works at a stately home that's been turned into a hospital for recovering soldiers. There's Jacob, who's just returned from British India. He's inherited a nearby half-ruined Norman castle. And then there's also Daniel, who's a patient at the hospital, and he's recently returned from the Palestine front in the war with a mysterious injury, which might be linked to a local legend which goes back to the time of the Crusades and is tied up around this ruined castle.
Natalie?
Yes, mine is a whiskey book. Whiskey journalist Ailey and her wife Morag have bought a dilapidated whiskey distillery in Campbelltown, which was once the whiskey capital of the world, like the most whiskey produced there, and that kind of thing was legendary. And all these decades later now, it's a bit of a contested region. Actually, there's only 2 or 3 left there, and so they're going to disrupt the male-dominated industry of whiskey, but 2 of the barrels that they hope will sell for millions, or maybe they can blend into something cool, that have been sat there since the 1970s, have 2 dead bodies in them. So it's them, opens with that and them sort of going, oh no, and they decide to hide the bodies for now. But it's a lot about them dealing with the fact that there are dead bodies there. And each chapter is in the present day, with Ailey alternating with the chapter of the murderer in second person view. So it's Ailey's chapter in like 2023, and then the you chapter in the 1970s, and then Ailey, and then 1980s, Ailey, 1990s, and so on. So, and then eventually the timelines converge. So, there's a lot of characters in the town that you meet in Campbelltown, and you're sort of thinking, oh, is it one of them? Is it one of them? Is it, who is it, kind of thing. So it's a bit of fun. It's a lot about the whiskey industry and sort of women's role in it, but just a love of whiskey, but also about Ailey and Morag's relationship as well, and the murder, obviously. Murders, plural.
And Claire, do you want to?
Hello, I'm Claire Wilson, and I'm the author of 5 by 5, which is centres around Unity, the protagonist, who is an intelligence analyst in a Scottish prison. It's her job to stop violence, stop drugs, and stop corruption. And I'm just going to read the tagline on the front, because that sums it up the best. It says, "You're hunting a killer, you're falling in love. What if they're the same person?" And there's a book. And it's based on my day job, and as I am employed as an intelligence analyst in a Scottish prison. So that's my USP. That's
sort of where I wanted to go with my first question, because I know you're an intelligence analyst as your day job. And I wondered if you'd all sort of gone for a comfort zone for your first book, or something that you're kind of a bit of an expert in, and if you'd want to tell us a little bit about that. So Claire, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've done a lot of writing courses and writing retreats, and the first thing that you're told is write what you know. So I put that into practice and wrote about my day job, because I thought it was unique enough that it still fits into the crime, but it's a wee bit different, because there's not a lot of prison-based books out there. And I tried to compare it to like the Shawshank Redemption, which was aiming really high. And once I was employed and I learned the role, and I learned what my duties and my responsibilities were, I realised that there was a crime story here. And once I learned how to execute it and plot it, the the rest is history. You know, I wrote it, rewrote it about 108 times. I've read it about 508 times, and after years and years and years of trying to get an agent and trying to get the book out there, it finally happened. So it's definitely, it's helped me by writing what I know and using my daily experiences in my writing, because it has brought a lot of readers, and it's showing people what it's like to live and work in a prison, because 90% of the population will never ever ever see inside a real prison. And that's what I hope to achieve with the books. I'm hoping that it's going to be like a double-digit series, and people will actually understand like the bigger picture and how difficult it is to be a prisoner, how difficult it is to work in a prison, and the complex nature and the complex issues that surround that. And I think that would be quite interesting to a lot of people. So I'm just going to stick to what I know, basically, and hopefully it does me well.
So, Natalie?
Yeah, so I just find that really interesting, Claire, and I think that's fascinating because you do have this unique selling point, like you say, that sort of insight into it, of the reality of it. So yeah, mine is, yeah.
So it's interesting because I can tell you that the next big thing in the crime world is actually whiskey theft, because whiskey and watches are the only thing that don't depreciate in value. And we're starting to see people coming in, and it's like it's big organised whiskey thefts and that. So when I seen your pitch at Bloody Scotland, I was like, she's ahead of the curve. She's one to watch.
That's really cool. Okay, I think whiskey theft definitely. And actually, I was sort of, you know, at the moment we're kind of on the edge of a potential whiskey bust, maybe, like it kind of goes in booms and busts, because it is so also tied up with financial things and people invest in whiskey, you know. And that's what I was seeing, was that there was, you know, more distilleries being built, and more, you know, so therefore more product being made, but there's a sort of max capacity of it, really. You know, there's only so much that people, and obviously it's a consumable, but it's also alongside that a product that people invest in as well. So yeah, that's interesting, the whiskey theft, and you know, the recent kind of expose on all the casks. You know, some people are investing in casks, then they've been promised that they will be worth, you know, however many much more, you know, in how many years, and actually it turns out the casks don't exist, or the same cask has been sold to 10 people. But I'm definitely now going to go away and research whiskey theft as well, because that's it. If you can, you know, sort of prove it's a whatever kind of Ardbeg whiskey from whatever decade, then, you know, you're laughing. And it's, you know, one barrel could be worth a lot of money. You know, some barrels sell for millions, you know, and that's what I opened my Bloody Scotland pitch with, is that, you know, last year a single cask of Ardbeg whiskey sold for £6 million. It's big business. But yeah, for me, I'm someone that gets really, really interested in lots of different things. But whiskey is one of the things that's kind of held my attention over the years, where other things I might flit in and out of. And I first discovered it at uni. So I was 19, and I partly just enjoyed, you know, being young, and also being a woman often in a room of men, and sort of having knowledge and like knowing a lot and knowing more, or being somewhat seen as unexpected. Oh, this young woman knows all about whiskey, you know. And I, you know, there's something kind of fun about that. But it was also, yeah, just it as a topic fascinates me, because every single part of the process you could do a thesis on. You know, you could do a thesis just on the wood, you know, for casks that it's matured in. So people don't know, so Scottish whiskey or Scotch whiskey, it has to be sat in a cask in Scotland for 3 years and a day, and then only then can it be called the product Scottish whiskey or Scottish whiskey. And, you know, there's even just you know, the cask. Some people look at the provenance of the wood of the cask, and look at the rainfall of that year from when the trees were cut down and made into that cask. And then, you know, the casks usually have had something else before them. There's even an idea about like the way the grain is cut. Anyway, that's just like one tiny element of it, and you could go really deep dive into it. And there's a little bit in the book where I talk about like even Japanese whiskies, and they use slightly different wood, and how that imparts a different flavor, all that kind of stuff. So it's been something that I've been really interested in, and I did a course early 2020, a whiskey accreditation course, and it was the first of its kind at the time. where I literally got a certificate to say I'm good at whiskey, and I got full marks on the theory and the practical, where we had to identify whiskies and things. So a lot of fun. And then because I've just got interested in it, and like I love the stories that I hear all the time, and it was on a distillery tour that someone said, oh, those barrels haven't been looked at in like 50 years, and immediately my mind went, oh, dead body. And it was, but then that was just sort of an idea until the Pitch Perfect application, and I thought, oh, there's something there that I can make from it. So this is more me writing about my hobby. And actually what was great was then all of a sudden my hobby, something that I used to like procrastinate what I was meant to be doing, work, looking up whiskey or whatever. Now I got to do it as research and say, oh, well, I have to visit this distillery. It's research, book research. So so this is about my hobby. Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Richard?
I say it's my book, because what I was really interested in was the influence of landscape on character. So the sort of location that I wrote about, it wasn't even so much it was my comfort zone, it was my zone. It's kind of almost where I live. So I live in the sort of northwest edge of Edinburgh, and much of my book is set in the strip of coast, essentially between that point and South Queensferry. So walking that, this area that I've walked around a lot before, and walking that area and exploring it was a key part of the research for the book. I've also had I studied history at university, history and archaeology, and this was the first sort of historical piece of work that I've done. And I kind of didn't realize that was my comfort zone, I think. And once I started getting into it, started doing the historical research, it felt like I was relying on old skills that I maybe hadn't used for quite a while. And that process of reading and researching, it doesn't just, for me, it didn't just help clarify the story I was trying to tell. It also generates more ideas that you can then incorporate into the story. So that was part of it, which was almost like an end in itself. I found really enjoyable. So it's a combination of those two aspects did make it feel like a comfortable journey.
What is book 2? I know we're on your debut book, but what's book 2 going to look like for all of you? Because I'm not having the gist I've got so far. Claire's feels like it could carry on as a series. I'm less sure where you two are going to go. Are you going to develop them into a series? We're going to see more of those characters, or are you going to go somewhere completely different next?
What I'm currently writing is not a continuation. There could be things that I think there's more to explore in with some of the characters, and also talking about landscape. Campbelltown is very interesting. It's on the Kintyre Peninsula, very long peninsula. It gets quite isolated, but it's actually got Davar, I think, Island, and it's one of those places where it's only accessible depending on the tides. And that didn't make it into this book, but I think that, like kind of Women in Black style, that could be quite an interesting thing to come back to. And obviously it's still in the same place. So there could be something else that Ailey, ends up exploring, another history, another grisly secret of the town that she reveals. That's sort of over there somewhere, in one part of my brain. But what I'm currently writing about is a con artist in the 60s and 70s, forging and stealing, Scottish artworks and books and things like that. And the books behind me are a lot of the ones that I'm researching with at the moment. So there's things like Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abagnale, and if you remember the Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg film. Well, it's based on a true story. Well, it turns out the biggest con was that Frank Abagnale did not do those things. He is a con artist in the sense he made up his cons. So I find him extremely fascinating, and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm currently doing. So mine is she's sort of writing up her escapades over sort of a decade, because she's about to go to jail, but actually her body is found. And the manuscript is found with the body. So it's kind of like, out of all the people she has conned or wronged, who could it have been? And there's a journalist following it along and things like that. So that's what I'm kind of working on. I just again, it's another interest of mine. Like, I've been really, really fascinated by con artists of all kind. A lot of it's just their audaciousness. Essentially, like, the bigger the lie, the more people believe it, because people think like, well, why you couldn't lie about that. That's so insane. And so that's how these people in real life get away with it, in a sense. They kind of, anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at. And it's going to be fun. So she's you know, the one who's written the manuscript is the one that's lead. Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Who wants to go next, Claire or Richard?
Richard, you can go next.
Yeah, I'll hop in. So my second book's out in April, and it's going to be, if this first book, The Unrecovered, is a sort of gothic mystery, the second book is going to be a sort of ghost story, and it's set around in and around a bomber command air base in the Second World War. So it's not a continuation, it's not a sequel, but it has like sort of thematic continuities between the first book. I don't want to give too much away of The Unrecovered or the second book, but it's looking at the filmmaker Guillermo del Toro. He talks about the license of genre. So he uses genre as like a lens through which you can explore other things. So in this first book, The Unrecovered, what I was trying to do is explore the idea of post-traumatic stress through a gothic lens. The second book will essentially try to do that through the lens of the supernatural and hauntings, or literal hauntings, but how these things manifest. And then the third book, which I've not finished, I'm writing at the moment, will be a kind of almost like sort of H.P. Lovecraft style cosmic horror, but set in and around the Navy in the First World War. So you have these three books could be taken as a kind of sequence. It's like the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, through the sort of prism of these kind of like genre perspectives, which again they don't carry on from each other. They're not sequels or anything, but they have maybe like perhaps a recurring character, you know, a minor character in one book might pop up in the third book or vice versa. So that's what I'm currently working on.
Cool. Claire?
I'm still writing book 2. I'm rewriting it just now, and it is a continuation, and it is a change in location. So 5x5 is set in a male establishment, an all-male establishment, and the second book is going to be set in an all-female establishment, and that will show the contrast between male offenders and female offenders and how sometimes they can be perceived that they get treated differently, as well as showing that there's still criminals and criminal things happen in it. So I'm enjoying writing it, and I'm hoping to be finished by the end of the month. So fingers crossed.
Do you have to, I've just got a follow-up question from earlier for you. Do you have to be careful about sort of not putting too much of your day job in? Are there sort of do people have to check what you're writing to make sure you're not going to?
Well, that's a good question, because when I was offered my deal, I had to bring it to the attention of the prison service, and you know, I had to wait for a couple of weeks while the book was. I had to provide like the book in its current format so that it could be read by a manager, and they could see if there was anything in it that I was putting myself at risk for, or putting any of my colleagues at risk for, or the establishment at risk for. And luckily, the things that they came back were very, very minor things that I had to change, which did not impact on the story, and actually helped in some ways. And they had to basically give me permission to allow me to publish the book. There could have been a choice that I would have had to have chosen between my day job and being able to feed my child and pay my mortgage, or accept the publication deal and, you know, make my dreams come true. So I'm very, very lucky and very, very grateful that I wasn't forced to make that choice, and that the prison service have been like so supportive over the last 2 years, and more supportive than I anticipated them being. I believe the book's available in some of the prison libraries, which just blows my mind. And they have been so supportive. But yeah, I have to be very careful. And especially, I mean, I've worked in the prison service for nearly 25 years. So that's 25 years of, you know, meeting people, and I've been very, very careful. And people, you know, people will say, right, who's this character? Who's it really? It's got to be somebody. And I've been so careful not to, like I've changed genders and I've changed ethnicities and stuff so that nobody can be recognised and nobody can claim to be in my book, because I just wouldn't leave myself open to that kind of bad negative exposure. So, but yeah, I have to be very careful, and you have to be mindful of course, we can be inspired by real life events, but it's taking aspects of somebody else's trauma and somebody else's story and changing it so that you're not glorifying something, taking advantage of somebody's like bad past and stuff. So it is a fine line at times, but I use my imagination to make up the rest. So
we've got some hellos from Sarah, Donna, and Dawn. And Dawn wants to know, she's got a question for all of you, if your books are gory. I guess that's very open to judgment, isn't it? Because there's probably bits in everybody's books that are potentially quite gruesome.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like my murders happen off screen, so to speak. Like, a chapter opens with the you character, the murderer, like you notice the blood pooling in the frills of your shirt, and they've battered down the lids of the barrels already, so we don't see that murder happen. But one of the characters later, 50 years later, opens the barrel. They're opening the barrels, and that's how they find obviously the bodies. So there's some kind of description there of like the bodies and things like that. So I wouldn't say so, but there's definitely like that, there's a couple of scenes like that. So it's not massively, but there's that little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got most in my book. Most of the sort of violence or threat is kind of implied, or it's like an atmosphere more than anything. But I think there is a couple of scenes towards the end in a kind of flashback section, which are quite violent, quite sort of disturbing. Yeah, but that's probably about it. It's not wall to wall.
Yeah, there's a scene in my book that when I wrote it originally, and then my editor came back and said, actually, can you look at this one again, this part, and kind of like just maybe tone it down a wee bit, and that was absolutely fair. It didn't impact the story again, but it's hard not to glorify violence. I mean, prisons can be super, super violent places and horrific things can happen inside them. And it's that fine line about it being authentic and realistic compared to glorifying it and having it there just for shock value. So that there is one scene where people might be, like, that's not nice, but, skip it. It's no a huge part of the story, but and sadly it is the reality of being in prison and the reality how violent acts can still happen.
So one thing I like to ask people when we do these is, why do you think there is such a lasting and ongoing legacy of Scottish crime fiction? What makes you stand out and be so popular amongst like the crime sort of fiction genre as a whole?
I think it's because we're the friendliest, to be honest. Like Scottish crime writers and Scottish people are just really, really friendly, and like I think a lot of Scottish crime writers come from like working class backgrounds and stuff, so their books are authentic, they're gritty, and I think that's what appeals to people, because it's like when you drive past a car accident, you really don't want to see what's going on, but you still kind of peer over like your window to see. And I think like crime fiction is like that. It gives people the chance to kind of just peer into the dark side of people without actually having to engage in any way real life. And I think that shines through in the fiction, and it just makes it so relatable when you're reading. And I've just finished Liam McIlvaney's The Good Father, and I love a book that makes you think, oh, what would I do in that situation? And his book just sums that up, and it's putting these real life relatable incidents into a book and making them just enjoyable, and that's why people keep going for the books, because they're getting that way, that like voyeurism almost, I think.
Yeah, and I think with books especially, you can kind of choose the level of it in a way, because it's your imagination that is the thing. So you can with crime and things like that, you can imagine, or you can skip a little bit easier than I think you can with the noise and the visuals of TV or film and things like that. But and I agree with like the friendliness and everything like that. And like I think almost every crime writer I've met, it talks a lot about how much their libraries were important to them. Like that was the place, and I was there all the time, because that was the free place to go, like that my mum could take us, kind of thing. So for sure. And I also think something potentially about, and this might be extremely like, I don't know, cliche or something to say, but the darker nights, the rugged landscape, nature is is murderous, so perhaps there's something about that, the longer night, there's, I've got friends that live just a little bit higher than me, and in winter, there's barely any hours of light at all. And actually, even where I am, like sort of midpoint of Scotland, if it's a cloudy day, you've got no light at all. It gets really dark. I've got friends that live in Orkney, no light. And so I think the kind of telling of sort of scary stories is, and I think crime comes under scary stories because if you look at a lot of fables and things like that, and kids' stories, even in ghost stories, they're sort of warnings and things like that. And I think crime feels that kind of thing, like kind of what Claire was saying, that it's sort of you learning about or thinking about that in a sort of safe environment as well. Yeah. So I don't know why Scotland specifically, but that's the thought.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Claire there. I think crime fiction is a kind of it's a social form. It's all crimes are kind of issues of society, and crime fiction gives you the ability to dig into society, from high to low, basically, and explore issues that maybe are kind of like brushed under the carpet or sort of moved over it in other forms. I think for Scotland in particular, once you have any kind of tradition that's been established, that it almost like perpetuates itself. So once you have a good bedrock, it's what comes next can build on that and build on that and build on that. So it's here you have a number of writers, number of books who have been very important for quite a long time now, and I think it's built its own tradition.
Yeah, like if you see it, you can be it, kind of thing. So yeah, if you're surrounded by a literary nation and like the crime writers, then yeah, they've paved the way. Mm-hmm.
And we've got incredible festivals as well, like Bloody Scotland, kind of encouraging people along. So tell us a little bit about how you all felt when you got that call to say you were on this shortlist. What did that mean?
I was personally extremely humbled. Like I think any kind of shortlisting for any kind of competition means that people have taken your work seriously and they felt that it was worth celebrating, and that can only be, unless you're a complete raging egomaniac, that can only be quite humbling to know that people have seen value in what you've done, especially when I'm sure the others will agree that it's often something that comes at the end of a very long journey. So it can feel like not a reward, but it could feel like there's an end point, there's something that you've achieved, which other people have taken notice of.
Yeah, for sure. I was
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I was sorry, yeah, I was sat on my sofa with my dog, and I got the call, and then again, just sort of, it was dreamlike, and just saying, oh yes, yeah, oh amazing, oh okay, thank you, and then sort of hung up, and I was like, what do I do with this energy? What do I do with this information? It was just me and the dog, so I had a little dance around the living room with the dog, but yeah, mad, and also it was quite quick after being published, so that for me just gave that support of the book almost straight away, which is invaluable. That it's now being recommended alongside Claire's and Richard's and the others' books. That's amazing, and yeah, just really supportive and lots of lovely publicity like this, and lots of lovely like book clubs and things like that. I think it just helps you sort of stand out a little bit as well, like cut through the noise a wee bit, these kinds of shortlistings. And I know Bloody Scotland are just extremely supportive and know that these kind of opportunities are invaluable, and the extra support that it gives us is mad. And yeah, I think I'm still like, I don't even believe I have a book out, let alone that it's shortlisted. I can put shortlisted in my bio forever. It doesn't matter what happens next. You know. So yeah, felt amazing. Still feel quite, you know, walking on air kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I might have been the last to know because, you know, I'm not allowed my mobile phone at work. And when I finished work, I had an email from Bob saying, "Can you give me a call on this number?" And I was like, "That's strange." Like, I didn't think about the shortlisting at all when I was like, "Oh, maybe I'm going to be invited to Bloody Scotland at some capacity." And so I phoned him and he told me, and I was just like, you know, like, oh, it was just the relief because I wanted it so badly. And I just missed out on the eligibility last year because my book came out in August, and I think you had to be published by the end of July. And when I seen who was shortlisted last year, I mean, it was such a strong group, and I was like, thank God, my book's in August, and hopefully next year. And then you see who you're shortlisted with, and you're just like, oh, it's another strong list, it's another strong group. And I'm just like absolutely relieved to be recognised, and like to me it does feel like a reward for all my like hard work and stuff, and the resilience that comes into trying to make it and get yourself out there and stuff. I'm just so relieved to be involved. I would have been absolutely heartbroken if the shortlist had been announced and I wasn't on it, you know. And no one will ever be able to take that feeling away from me. And regardless of what happens on the 12th of September, I'll still be a shortlisted author. Anything else is just a bonus. And I'm just grateful that everybody else on the shortlist is so nice because it just makes it harder.
It makes it really nice, isn't it? Because there's no like, it doesn't matter. It kind of doesn't matter at this point because like, oh, it's really nice, and we can celebrate each other for the next, you know, couple of months anyway, and look forward to seeing people. Like it's not, it doesn't feel like a competition, you know. Yeah, it just feels like we get to be part of the class of 25.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely. And we were discussing earlier about the absolute diverse long listing of the McIlvanney Prize, and to think that like we're going to share that night with such a wide range of people, and there's so many people on the long list I would love to see on the short list, but I know how much it means to them just being recognised on the long list, and you know, like that could be us. There's so many debut shortlisters on the McIlvanney long list that it's reasonable to assume that next year or the year after one of us will be on that, and it feels like this is just the start, and it feels right, and it feels like this is where we're supposed to be, and I'm just so grateful to everybody that's been able to put me here, to be honest. I'm just so grateful.
So have any of you prepared like a speech in advance just in case it's you? Or are you all going to be too superstitious?
I've been shortlisted for 2 awards so far this year, and one was the first one was the crime debut, and it was about 40 minutes before the award ceremony, and I thought I better write something down, and I didn't win, and that was fine. And then the next one was capital crime, and I thought, well, the same speech applies, and I didn't win. So I'm not writing a speech this time because that's clearly where I'm going wrong. I will wing it.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, also September's ages away. I'm really just looking forward to Bloody Scotland, just to have fun. You know, I've been there a couple of times in the past and things, and I'm just looking forward to it. And yeah, not going to prepare that in advance. Just enjoy it and go with the flow and whatever feels right in the moment. You know, and keep it short and sweet, or whatever, or be there congratulating and hugging someone else. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm too superstitious, so I wouldn't prepare anything. I just play as it falls, just to see what happens.
And then, because we are a book group and we like a book recommendation, tell us what you have all read recently and really enjoyed.
I'm going to have to double check the name of the author. Is that all right? I'll just quickly.
Yeah, that's fine.
If I could jump in, a book that I read recently, which I absolutely loved, was The Haunted Wood by Sam Leith. It's a history of children's fiction, sort of British children's fiction, in the roughly from the sort of Victorian period to the 1990s. And it's just it's an incredibly written book. He's a brilliant critic. He writes for a number of newspapers and the Times, the Spectator, I think. And it reintroduced me just to books that maybe I'd read when I was a kid, or that I'd never got around to reading when I was a kid, and I sort of picked up some of them and read again as an adult. It's just a wonderful celebratory book about maybe a field of fiction that's maybe not taken quite as seriously critically. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, mine is, and I actually read it because of my book group. So this was a book club, a book that I read a wee while back, and it's called The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. And it's, a group of women have invented time travel in the 1960s. And it's sort of the results of that over time. But it's a locked room mystery, but we know that time travel is involved somehow, but kind of how. But a lot of it is about the psychology of time travel, and essentially there's like a kind of organization that's grown up around it, that's kept this technology to this kind of corporation. And people that time travel, they now get used to meeting themselves all the time, or like meeting their own children or their partners throughout the years. And like if you go to one of their weddings, there will be like 50 versions of themselves, because that's a place that they all want to visit again, and it's really interesting. It's like silver self and green self, so they haven't come up with their own language. But yeah, so it's a locked room mystery. Someone gets shot, but you don't know how. There's no one else in the room. They're just, this person has been shot in a locked room. So yeah, a lot of fun, and I really like the jumps through time and the psychology of time travel as well.
It's a really hard question. I mean, it's probably the one question that I hope not to be asked the most, because I read a lot and it's hard to remember like everyone. But as I say, I've just recently finished Liam McIlvaney's The Good Father. I think it came out yesterday. It's really good. It's a bit different to his previous books. But I also read Professor Duncan Hardin's The Criminal Mind. He's a child psychiatrist, and it's a non-fiction like biography of his time working in security units and stuff, and working with criminals and young people, and it's fascinating. So I would recommend that to any true crime fan. It's definitely worth your time.
Sounds good. And then to whet people's appetites who are watching, and maybe haven't sort of quite decided which one to delve into yet, introduce your main characters to our viewers.
I'll go first. So I've got three main characters in my book. There is Esther, who is a volunteer nurse, sort of treating recovering soldiers, and she's also an aspiring poet. So her favorite poet is Robert Browning, and it's part of her journey through the book, as well as her relationship with the two other characters, is trying to find a new form for poetry that she could write about her experiences, that moves away from that maybe more elusive Victorian style into something more modern. There's also Jacob, who is he's recently returned from British India. His father ran a series of undertakers in India, and he has tuberculosis. So he's slightly feckless, slightly doomed, slightly a cynical character who finds himself wrapped up in this medieval legend and sort of prophecy that he's throws himself into with some abandon. And there's also Daniel, who is someone who wanted to become a minister, so a very religious kind of figure, but who's kind of lost his faith through his experiences in the war, and who's been wounded in this slightly bizarre encounter that you can't fully remember, and which he begins to think is in some way connected also to this strange legend. So he's more sort of drifting, enigmatic character who then gradually becomes more concrete as the book continues.
Okay, who wants to go next?
My protagonist is called Kennedy. She's 26 years old, and she strives to be a perfectionist in the male-dominated environment that she works in, at the detriment of her own happiness, because she likes to keep her personal life hidden. And when she meets somebody, and she thinks that she's met the one, but then she starts to receive intelligence that this person might actually be this shadowy, corrupt staff member that she's been hunting, and she has to decide between her heart and her head, her job and her love life. And you would have to read the book to see what path she chooses.
That's a great way to whet their appetite, yeah. My protagonist is Ailey, and I was talking about my book club. So I've been part of my book club since 2019, so over 6 years now. And it's a queer book club, so we always read something that has a queer author or queer themes or a bit of both. And one of the things that we kept coming back to was like just kind of what about more longer term, queer relationships or like more everyday relationships. So I was very keen to have a normal everyday, what is just a queer gay relationship look like, and what does it look like in this kind of stress, I guess. So Ailey is married to Morag. She's bisexual as well. I don't think I would like more bi plus representation. And she's got ADHD as well. So that's another thing that I think is really great to have more explicit representation of. And so there's the joys and the challenges that come with all of that. And especially them moving to quite a remote rural place. You don't always know how you're going to be accepted. As well. So, and she's obsessed with whiskey, like just obsessed with it. And then she becomes obsessed with, and she knows a lot about it. She's an info dumper. Like she a lot of whiskey, a lot of fun whiskey stuff in it. And she's very charismatic, but then she kind of becomes quite obsessed with the bodies. And Morag keeps saying, please, we need to keep them hidden. Stop this. And it's sort of their relationship over time. So, and I sort of describe Morag as a Word doc. Morag is a Excel spreadsheet person, and Ailey, the protagonist, is more like a Word doc person. That's where she'll like do her notes and stuff. So, and then the other main character really is the you person is the murderer. So I won't reveal too much, but sort of in the chapters we see over the decades, we see in the present day Ailey, trying to like make this distillery. While also with this, thing hanging over them, and a documentary crew from BBC are coming to document the first women-owned distillery. But there's also the you character throughout the decades, and we sort of get to see the parallels and the contrast between their experience in the whiskey industry through the decades versus like what it is like now. And there's some frustrating things that have not changed and other things that have. So yeah, Ailey is a lover of pot noodles, whiskey, and a good mystery. So if you relate to any of that whatsoever, then yeah, go for it.
And we've touched on the constraints a little bit of like Claire's job on the writing, but when you're delving back into the past as well in books, there must be some things that sort of limit what you, maybe not limit's not the right word, but sort of some constraints that you have then on them being able to investigate the crime in a way that's different to how you would now. So what kind of sort of challenges did you find with those settings that you've chosen?
Yeah, for sure. Like, thankfully, this one, a lot of the investigating is happening now. So we have the internet, we have the phone. I know there's a lot of crime writers and this is kind of why part of the reason my next one is set more in the past. Sometimes the internet and phone can be a hindrance because it's really too easy to find out stuff, actually, or stalk someone. Like I could right now find out loads of information about someone, whereas before, but then it works in reverse, where if you did a crime, you might have been able to hide it better. But which is the case with my murderer, who could get away with more because they could just fudge the paper admin, of things. We hear all the time of how sort of the 70s onwards were quite an important time for policing, because all of a sudden they could start making links between things much better because they were getting more digital sort of ways of working, rather than having a file over here and a file over there and a file over there that don't ever get looked at together. Whereas now you can search things. So in terms of constraints, it worked in my murderer's favor, and therefore in my favor for some of it. Yeah.
I suppose for me, like my story takes place over 100 years ago, so um, the sort of difficulties for me were really thinking myself back. Partly, it's a sort of material thing. It's trying to research and find out what that kind of environment would look like. You know, what kind of clothes people would wear, what would be like, interior decoration would be like, how people got about from A to B, and that kind of thing. But it's also trying to kind of trying to research and recreate the way people thought. I think it's important that you don't try to impose a 21st century mentality on people who lived over 100 years ago. So it's trying to be generous and authentic to the way people would have actually framed things to themselves and experienced things and thought about things. So I think those were sort of the main difficulties that I had in my book.
Well, mine's is set in 2018, and like obviously I don't have the issues that you guys have with your book set a wee bit further in the past, but you know, like it's important to me that the book was authentic, and as long as it's just authentic to me, then I'm happy with that. But that puts certain things into place because, you know, there's at work, like for example, a lot of the internet is blocked, so you can't access the internet. So sometimes I like to write like in my lunch hour, or there's times in the past where I've been doing like a 4-hour overtime shift at the weekend, and I would stay on later or go in earlier because, you know, I can't take my phone into work. I can't access the internet. Nobody knows that I'm in. My office is got a keypad rather than a key, which only 4 people in the world know the code to. So I can sit in there and I can concentrate on my writing without any distraction at all, and it's amazing. But when it comes to checking something, then, you know, I wish I had my phone, I wish I had the internet. It's quite difficult. But the reason that my book is set in 2018 is because I'm hoping that either book 3 or book 4 is going to be set during the pandemic. And while it's not going to be a pandemic book, a lot happened in the prison service during the lockdown. It was one of the safest places to be in the country, which, you know, can start a debate on whether that's fair or not. But ultimately, my goal is, at one point, I would like to write a book that's set in Berlin in the 80s with the infamous slasher governor, who was just corrupt as anything, and, you know, would stand by and watch his officers brutalise prisoners, and it resulted in the rooftop protests and stuff. And I would just love to be able to do that, but I just think I would get too immersed in the research that I would be exhausted and not be able to write it. I don't know if I've got the discipline for a historical novel like that. I don't know. That's a challenge. That's a challenge for me, I think.
Yeah, I think sometimes writing historical stuff, you have to get to a point where like your own imagination has to take precedence. Sometimes you have to, you know, maybe bend the facts slightly or discard them, or just you know, fundamentally it's meant to be a piece of imaginative literature. So yeah, but it can be a difficult line to walk along.
What I'm finding depressing is that we're talking about the 80s as historical.
I know, but you know what I mean. Like, what would you clap? What historical? What up until what point would that be? Would it be?
Sadly, I think you are right. I think your classification of the 80s as historical is correct. There is a question on here that's like, because all of you got some elements. Well, you haven't yet, but you're debating it. I've got some elements of the past, and Patricia, who's you're going to meet at Bloody Scotland, she's fabulous. She's our Scottish book-loving admin champion, who's just amazing. She's wondering if readers are maybe more fascinated with a bit of history in their crime fiction now. You know, maybe are we getting a little bit beyond all the modern crimes and wanting?
I think in general, like a lot of people are wanting something like more familiar or like comforting or escapism, and in a way there's nostalgia that comes with historical fiction. Do you know what I mean? And there's that extra layer there. So I wonder if it's part of that as well, this kind of like yearning for a different time, you know, before, whereas sci-fi would be looking forward. So I wonder if that's part of it as well, sort of like now is a bit too much, but let's go back a bit, you know, and that could just be a sign of the times as well, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think I don't know. One thing you could say about the past is it's not comforting at all. Like a lot of it's makes today look fairly tame. Um, so I wonder if it's yeah, but on the other hand, it maybe is like a sort of a safer, bounded space where you can explore stuff because it's already happened. You know what the parameters of it are. It doesn't have any kind of like ongoing, within the context of the story, it doesn't have any sort of ongoing consequences. But there does seem to have been a sort of a general cultural interest in things like cold cases, and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know what the underlying reasons for that would be, but it is definitely a trend that seems to be on the up.
I think it's possibly because you've got really good writers writing historic fiction that you just want to return to their books. I mean, like I've certainly read more historical fiction in the last 2 or 3 years than I probably have my whole life, because I'm at a stage, or I'm old enough to appreciate history, whereas maybe before I haven't. It wasn't something that I was interested in when I was at school. And it wasn't until my son was a toddler and he became obsessed with horrible histories. And I feel like I've got all my historical, like, history knowledge for watching horrible histories on repeat for about 10 years. And the songs still live rent free in my head. And I think it's that having that appreciation of like what's come before. And as I said, like, there's some fantastic historical fiction writers, and not just in like crime, like in general. So I think that's got a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and also like there's kind of parallels between what's happened before and what's happened now, and maybe it's another way of making sense, like sci-fi kind of does in a way, where it's sort of like this is what the conclusion, what could happen if, and like so it's another way of making sense. But you're saying horrible histories, is it Terry Deary that wrote them? He's going to be there at Bloody Scotland this year. I'm really excited. I had a subscription to the horrible history magazines. I had all the books. I'm definitely gonna
I'm hoping that my son can come to obviously Bloody Scotland this year. He's 20 now, and he'd be mortified that I was mentioning this, and just to be like, oh my god, that's the guy that I mean, we watched that a lot.
Yeah, but my kids are massive horrible histories fans as well, so yeah, I'm well familiar with them.
I'm smiling at you because I interviewed Terry a little while ago for the book room. His book is amazing. So definitely go and check him out and buy his book.
He's responsible for like so many young people not just getting into history but getting into reading. Like the layout of the horrible histories for me, like I was a big Beano person. I'm someone that's always needed like a little, especially as a kid, like needed the like image of things and things split up like that, and the way those books are laid out and then subsequently magazines, I think were just perfect. And he absolutely gets that young people love a bit of like reality of the the gruesome reality of it, and I know it's not just him that sort of made them, but I think he's the humor that comes with the darkness he really gets.
Yes.
One of my favorite questions to ask, I'm really inspired by Natalie talking about the Beano, another great Scottish product as well, is would you make a graphic novel version of your books, or would you be willing to work for an adaptation of a graphic novel of your books?
Absolutely, if somebody did the actual graphics and the drawing and the illustrating, because that is not my strong point at all, but I would try anything, because you never know. I mean, that could be where I find most enjoyment. It might not be novels, it might be graphic novels. So I would say yes to everything, to be honest. Maybe not everything. I'll maybe take that back. But when it comes to writing and stuff, I would my mind is open, shall we say, for any possibilities or opportunities that come my way.
I've never even thought of that, but that, yes, of course, I would love that. And actually, I should go out right now and find a graphic designer who could, like do the drawing and work with it. Because, I love, manga and everything. Yes, I would love that, and I think it would be quite fun to do the adaptation as well and see what it is like, brought to life that way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, it's not something I've thought of either, and certainly not something I do myself because I cannot draw. But I just, when you asked that question, it just reminded me there've been two brilliant graphic novel adaptations of books recently: the Lord of the Flies, the William Golding novel, and what's the other one? Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea, The Wizard of Earthsea. They've both come out in really fantastic graphic novel adaptations. So yeah, it's a really valuable form, and I think it'd be amazing if someone did that with my book.
And it's a good kind of history of like really good Scottish authors getting involved in writing graphic novels, isn't there? So you've got Val McDermid's done some, Ian Rankin's written for like Hellblazer, so is Denise Mina. So it's been a grand tradition of like your fellow authors before you, if you went that way.
Yeah, my earliest reading wasn't children's books really. It was 2000 AD, and really violent comics when I was a kid. And I think a lot of those, the big like John Wagner and Alan Grant and stuff, they're all Scottish writers who were involved in it. So yeah, yes.
Did David Bishop help?
Yes.
He was the editor of 2000 AD, yeah, for a while. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he's a noted historical crime writer as well.
Yeah, love the series. And one of our other favourite crime book group questions is: have you ever acted out one of your scenes as you've written
it?
Maybe by myself. Maybe I've talked it out loud. Yeah. Yeah. And there's some whiskey tastings in it, so I've kind of selected whiskey and thought about the scene and how that would go and how they would describe the dram in front of them. So I had a few whiskies that I was had in front of me, but I don't think I've acted any of them out. Not yet.
I would say yes. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
I'm saying I would say yes, but only because I'm describing at the start of the book the process of entering a prison and the security procedures that everybody must go through to be able to enter the establishment. So I suppose I act that out every day, but there are elements of writing where it's like method acting, where you have to test some things to make sure they're realistic in that. So if that's maybe a bit a reach, but yeah, I would say that's probably something that I do just to make sure that it's.
I do a lot of like closing my eyes and imagining, or I do a lot of like I take a dictaphone, or I send WhatsApp voice notes to myself on a walk. So more imagining it in my head and sort of fixing it as I go along. And be like, no, start from that bit again, and
Yeah, I've probably done it inadvertently because a lot of where the book is set is just along the coast from me. So like when I've been walking there, I've maybe tried to stand on the coastline looking Byronic and windswept, but just without sufficient hair. But yeah, that's not deliberate. I would just hope no one would see me trying to look Byronic. But yeah.
We've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to go around and just remind everyone what they're going to go and buy at the end of this chat if they have not already bought all of your books. Natalie, before we do that, for my dad, who is maybe not watching but did form our group and is a massive Scottish whiskey fan, tell us your favourite whiskey.
My favourite whiskey, I currently am really got back into a Talisker Storm. So it's from the Isle of Skye, and it's just a very good mixture of a little bit of everything, a little bit of salt, a little bit of caramel, do you know what I mean? Blah, 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 blah. And it goes with lots of different things. And I visited the distillery in 2018 at the time, and it hadn't rained for 5 days, and they'd had to half production because of the spring water. The lack of spring water. So what goes into it is real Scottish spring water, barley, so definitely a good one. And you can have it straight or have it with a little something as well. So I think it's lovely.
Cool. And then let's go around and remind everyone what they're going to go away and buy. So Claire, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So if you're a fan of Line of Duty, if you're a fan of Orange is the New Black, then go away and treat yourself to a copy of 5x5. The paperback is out on the 14th of August. And yeah, reads a hum a bit different, but not too different.
For sure. This is the book. It's you can get an ebook, paperback, audio, however you prefer. I don't know. Yeah, sort of. It's Ian Banksy and Taylor Reid Jenkins, or Taylor Jenkins Reid, kind of sort of thing, kind of quick pace sort of thing, Scottish, and just a bit of fun. The Malt Whiskey Murders, Natalie Jayne Clark.
Yeah, so I don't have a copy of my book, so I can't lift up. You have to just imagine it. But my book is The Unrecovered, and if you like Gothic mysteries, if you like poetry in the early 20th century, and strange goings on in wartime, then it's the book for you.
And that's all that's left for me to say. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you, and good luck.
Thank you, and thank you everyone that's listening and watching.